Princess Alara Vorant lounged across her crystalline chaise, violet eyes fixed on the holographic display that hovered above her outstretched palm. Her iridescent skin shimmered with irritation as she scrolled through endless birthday well-wishes from nobles she barely remembered meeting. 23rd birthdays on Azuria were meant to be extraordinary, yet here she was, bored to tears. "Your Highness," came the melodious voice of her chambermaid, Thelia. "Lady Vexaria awaits your presence in the grand atrium. She brings a special gift." Alara's antennae twitched with sudden interest. Her mother, the formidable Duchess of the Seventh Quadrant, wasn't known for her sentimentality or generosity. A special gift from Vexaria was worth investigating. The grand atrium of their ancestral estate sprawled beneath a dome of living crystal that fractured sunlight into 1,000 prismatic beams. Lady Vexaria stood regally at its center, her ceremonial cape cascading like liquid mercury around her tall frame. "Mother," Alara acknowledged with a respectful bow. "What brings you to the estate? I thought you were negotiating border treaties in the Proxima system." Vexaria's thin lips curled into what might generously be called a smile. Even diplomacy must pause for one's only daughter's birth commemoration. She gestured to the guards behind her. "I've brought you something exceedingly rare from my recent expedition to the Sol system." The guards parted to reveal a containment pod. Inside stood a creature Alara had only seen in xenobiology archives, a human male. Unlike the docile specimens occasionally displayed in high society menageries, this one stood tall, his posture unnaturally still. His skin was bronzed, his dark hair cropped close to his skull. But it was his eyes that caught Alara's attention, deep amber that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "A human?" Alara circled the pod, studying the specimen. "I thought the Council restricted their capture after the resistance on their homeworld." "This one is special," Vexaria replied, entering a code that dissolved the pod's force field. "Captured during a covert operation. He's been thoroughly mind-wiped and conditioned for domestication. The scientists assure me he's the perfect blend of intelligence and obedience, capable of learning complex commands yet docile enough for household keeping." The human didn't flinch as Alara approached, though she noted how his eyes tracked her movement with unsettling precision. "Does it have a designation?" Alara asked, reaching out to touch the metallic collar around his neck. The retrieval team called him Dominic. Apparently, it's a name that denotes mastery in their primitive language, quite ironic, given his circumstances. Dominic remained utterly still, his breathing measured, his face impassive. Yet something about his gaze made Alara's skin prickle with unease. "He's been programmed to respond to basic commands," Vexaria continued. "Stand, sit, follow. Their language processing is rudimentary, but they can associate sounds with desired behaviors." Alara tilted her head. "Stand," she commanded. Dominic was already standing. "Sit," she tried. After a calculated pause, just long enough to seem like processing delay rather than defiance, he lowered himself to one knee. "Fascinating," Alara murmured, "and he's mine to keep." "Entirely yours," Vexaria confirmed. "I've registered him in your name. The leading xenobiologists will be quite envious. He's a prime specimen, physically superior to most of their collection." As her mother spoke, Alara noticed something curious. When Vexaria mentioned xenobiologists, something flickered in the human's eyes, a micro-expression so brief she almost missed it. Recognition, understanding. Impossible, she told herself. Humans were classified as semi-sentient at best. They couldn't possibly comprehend complex language beyond trained commands. "Thank you, Mother," Alara said, covering her momentary unease with practiced grace. "He'll make an excellent addition to the household." Later, as servants prepared quarters for her new acquisition, Alara reviewed the data file her mother had provided. Service record fragments, physiological assessments, behavioral notes. Nothing particularly revealing, except for one detail that caught her attention. This specimen had been captured not from a civilian population center, but from something called a Special Forces operating base. In her private chamber, Dominic stood motionless by the wall, seemingly mindless. But beneath his carefully blank expression, Commander Dominic Reyes of Earth's Interstellar Defense Force calculated angles, memorized floor plans, and took inventory of every potential weapon within reach. He had survived 16 months of captivity by playing dumb, by becoming the perfect pet. And now, finally, he had found his way inside the heart of the enemy's command structure. He just needed time. Is that really a human? How delightfully primitive. Princess Alara's grand salon buzzed with the excited chattering of Azurian nobility. Her impromptu gathering had drawn twice the expected attendance, news of her exotic acquisition spreading through aristocratic circles like wildfire. Dominic stood perfectly still in the center of the room, displayed on a raised platform like a living statue. "Make it do something," urged Klovax, son of the regional governor. "I've heard they can mimic simple behaviors." Alara flicked her antennae imperiously. "Dominic, bow to our guests." He complied with mechanical precision, neither too quick nor too slow, giving nothing away. 3 weeks in the princess's household had taught Dominic exactly how much intelligence to display. Enough to seem trainable, not enough to arouse suspicion. "Remarkable," murmured Lady Pentrix, circling him with analytical eyes. "The musculature is quite developed. Is it aggressive?" "Not at all," Alara replied, reaching out to trace a finger along Dominic's jawline. "Thoroughly domesticated." Dominic focused on his breathing, steady, shallow, while cataloging everything around him. 16 nobles, 8 servants, 3 security officers positioned at the exits. The crystal chandeliers could be weaponized if shattered. The decorative staffs carried by the honor guards contained energy cells at their base. "I heard humans require ridiculous amounts of sleep," said Klovax, prodding Dominic's shoulder with unnecessary force. "And they die after barely a century, hardly worth the trouble of keeping one." Alara's friend Tazine giggled, her translucent gown catching the light as she approached. "Does it understand when we mock it? Watch this." She leaned close to Dominic's ear. "Your species is the laughingstock of the galaxy, little beast, barely evolved beyond throwing sticks at each other." Dominic allowed his eye to twitch slightly, a calculated response. Just enough reaction to amuse them, not enough to demonstrate true comprehension. The nobles delighted in his apparent discomfort, their laughter crystalline and cruel. "Show us a trick, Alara," Klovax demanded. "Surely you've taught it something entertaining." Something in Alara hesitated. She'd spent hours with Dominic over the past weeks, attempting to train him in various tasks. While outwardly compliant, she'd sensed a disturbing intelligence behind his actions, a precision that felt less like training and more like choice. "Dominic," she commanded, "perform the combat sequence." The human moved into position, executing a series of precisely controlled martial forms that she'd programmed into his training regimen. Each movement flowed with lethal grace, slowed just enough to seem performative rather than practical. "Magnificent," breathed Tazine. "It moves like a Vrillian dance fighter." "How much did Lady Vexaria pay for this specimen?" asked Pentrix, her tone suddenly businesslike. "My research division would offer substantial compensation for a breeding loan." Dominic maintained his blank expression, but internally he added Pentrix to his mental map of the power structure. Research division, breeding program, useful intelligence. "He's not for loan," Alara replied, surprising herself with her possessive tone. Dominic returned to rest position. As the evening progressed, the noble's fascination evolved into increasingly demeaning games. They made him carry trays while balancing on one leg. They tested his pain response by pinching the sensitive skin behind his ears. Klovax insisted on seeing if humans could hold their breath to the point of unconsciousness. Through it all, Dominic complied, revealing nothing while learning everything. Security protocols, personal relationships, technological vulnerabilities in the estate systems. After the guests departed, Alara found Dominic standing exactly where she'd last ordered him to remain. "You performed adequately tonight," she said, studying his impassive face, "though I question if—" She trailed off, disturbed by the intensity in his amber eyes. For a fleeting moment, she could have sworn she saw something dangerous there, not aggression, but calculation. "Rest now," she commanded, gesturing toward his containment chamber. As Dominic walked away with measured steps, Alara noticed something that sent a chill through her core. In the reflective surface of the crystal wall, she caught his reflection and saw his lips move in what appeared to be a silent count of the security panel's access sequence. Impossible, she told herself, yet doubt had taken root. That night, for the first time since acquiring her exotic pet, Princess Alara activated the additional security fields around her private chambers. Alara found herself increasingly distracted during her diplomatic lessons. Her tutor, Master Jalvik, had repeated the same question 3 times. "Your Highness, are you unwell?" the elderly Azurian asked, his concern evident in the rapid cycling of his skin patterns. "I'm fine," she replied, though she wasn't. For 5 weeks now, subtle irregularities had been occurring throughout the estate. Security droids found in unauthorized sectors, meal deliveries arriving in different sequences, communication frequencies experiencing momentary disruptions that the technical team couldn't explain. And through it all, her human pet had been flawlessly obedient, too flawless, perhaps. "We shall continue tomorrow," Jalvik sighed, gathering his educational crystals. After dismissing her tutor, Alara made her way to the atrium where Dominic was scheduled for his daily exercise regimen. She paused at the doorway, observing him unnoticed. He moved with disciplined precision through a series of physical exercises that resembled the combat forms she'd programmed into his routine, yet subtly different, more efficient, more lethal. When he finished, he stood motionless, staring at the reflection of the room in the crystal wall. His eyes moved systematically, cataloging something she couldn't perceive. "Dominic," she called sharply. He turned, dropping seamlessly into his subservient posture, eyes lowered, shoulders slightly hunched to diminish his height. The transformation was instantaneous. "Follow," she commanded, leading him to her private study. Once inside, she activated the room's privacy shields, technology that blocked all surveillance, used only for the most sensitive diplomatic communications. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to the floor beside her desk. Instead, Dominic met her eyes directly and lowered himself into the chair opposite hers. Alara's breath caught. "You understand everything I say, don't you?" For a moment, nothing changed in his expression. Then his lips curved into a slight, calculated smile. "I understand considerably more than just what you say, Princess Alara." His voice was deep, articulate, with an accent she couldn't place. Nothing like the grunting attempts at speech the xenobiologists had documented in their human specimens. Alara instinctively stepped back. "How long have you been able to speak?" "I've always been able to speak, 6 languages from Earth, and now yours as well." He remained seated, making no threatening moves, yet somehow commanding the space more powerfully than when he'd stood tall. "The question isn't when I learned to speak, but when I chose to reveal it." Anger flashed through her. "You've been deceiving me." "I've been surviving," he corrected calmly, "as I was trained to do as a Special Forces commander, as any intelligent being would do when collared and called pet." The revelation struck Alara like a physical blow. The data files had mentioned Special Forces, but she'd assumed it referred to a breeding category, not a military rank. "Why reveal yourself now?" she demanded. Dominic leaned forward slightly. "Because you're in danger, and it's beginning to intersect with my own plans." "Danger from what?" "Your security has been compromised, not by me, though I could have done so weeks ago." His amber eyes held hers. "The communication disruptions aren't random, they're systematic probes testing for weaknesses." Alara's mind raced. "And how would you recognize such patterns?" "Because I've executed similar operations." He raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "Someone is preparing to infiltrate this estate, Princess. Someone with high-level access and technical sophistication." She wanted to dismiss his claims, but too many unexplained incidents aligned with his assessment. "If what you say is true, why warn me? Why not use the chaos to escape?" Something complex passed across his features. "Escape to where? I'm light years from my homeworld. Besides," he hesitated, "you've shown moments of decency. You intervened when your friends wanted to test my pain thresholds. You increased my nutrient allowance without being asked." The observation disarmed her. She had done those things, though she hadn't realized he'd noticed. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "A partnership," he replied. "Temporary and conditional. I help secure your household. You start treating me as a sentient equal rather than property." Alara studied him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time, not as a possession or curiosity, but as a being of equivalent intelligence and agency. "You could be lying about the security breach to manipulate me." Dominic nodded. "I could be. Allow me to prove it." He stood slowly. Check the communication logs for anomalous encryptions during the third lunar cycle. Focus on transmissions bounced through the quaternary antenna array. It's the only one with a blind spot in your monitoring systems. Their eyes remained locked, hers wide with revelation, his steady with challenge. "If I find nothing," she asked, "then return me to my cell, increase security, and we'll both pretend this conversation never happened." He extended his hand in what she recognized from her xenobiology studies as a human greeting gesture. "But you will find something, and when you do, we should renegotiate the terms of my residence here." Alara looked at his outstretched hand, hesitating at the precipice of a decision that would irrevocably change their relationship. Then, with a deliberate motion that defied generations of cultural conditioning about human inferiority, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm against hers, the touch sending an unexpected current through her body. "Commander," she acknowledged, using his title for the first time. The diplomatic reception hall glittered with the assembled aristocracy of 3-star systems. Lady Vexaria had returned to the estate to host the annual treaty summit, bringing with her a retinue of dignitaries and their security forces. Princess Alara stood beside her mother, performing her ceremonial duties flawlessly while keeping one eye on the perimeter of the room. There, partially concealed behind a decorative pillar, stood Dominic. No longer dressed in the simple gray garments of a human pet, he wore the dark uniform of a personal security attendant, a compromise Alara had negotiated after confirming his warnings about the estate's compromised systems. "Your pet appears significantly altered," Lady Vexaria observed, following her daughter's gaze. "An unusual uniform choice." "Dominic has proven more valuable in an expanded role," Alara replied carefully. Vexaria's antennae twitched with disapproval. "Remember your position, daughter. Novelties from primitive worlds are amusing diversions, not confidants." Before Alara could respond, the diplomatic minister approached with the Proximan ambassador, drawing her mother into formal greetings. Alara used the moment to cross the room toward Dominic, who subtly directed her attention to a service entrance where 2 security guards were exchanging communication devices. "Suspicious," she murmured. "Confirmed," he replied quietly. "Those aren't standard-issue communicators. The encryption pattern matches the intrusions we traced." 3 days of working together had established an unexpected rapport between them. Dominic had demonstrated an uncanny ability to identify security vulnerabilities throughout the estate, while Alara had granted him increasingly significant access privileges, against all protocols for handling human specimens. "We should alert the chief security officer," she suggested. Dominic shook his head slightly. "Not yet. We don't know how high the compromise goes." Their conversation was interrupted as Klovax approached, his eyes widening at the sight of Dominic standing upright beside the princess rather than kneeling at her feet. "Princess Alara," he greeted, his tone dripping with affected charm. "I see your pet has been upgraded. How progressive of you." "Commander Reyes is assisting with security matters," Alara replied coolly. Klovax's face registered shock at both the title and the implied status. "Commander, surely you jest. These creatures can barely grasp basic technology, let alone—" "Pardon the interruption," Dominic cut in, his voice measured but firm. "But I believe your father is signaling for your attention, sir." The deliberate address and Dominic's perfect pronunciation left Klovax momentarily speechless. He retreated with poorly disguised indignation. "You enjoyed that?" Alara noted, fighting a smile. "Professional satisfaction only," Dominic replied, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Their shared moment of amusement vanished as the overhead illumination flickered, once, twice, before stabilizing. "That's not a power surge," Dominic said, instantly alert. "It's—" The explosion rocked the western wing of the estate, distant enough not to cause immediate damage to the reception hall, but close enough to trigger the emergency protocols. Security barriers slammed down, sealing the room as chaos erupted among the guests. "Containment Protocol Epsilon activated," announced the estate's AI. "All guests please remain in current positions. Security personnel to designated response locations." Dominic grabbed Alara's arm, pulling her closer as he scanned the room. "This isn't a random attack. It's coordinated." The chief security officer rushed to Lady Vexaria's side, his team forming a protective circle around her. Alara watched with growing unease as the two guards Dominic had identified earlier took positions near the main entry point. "We need to move," Dominic whispered urgently. "Those aren't just infiltrators, they're wearing molecularly aligned disruptors under their uniforms, explosive tech." Mother Alara began. "Is surrounded by her security team. You aren't. We need to get you out through the service corridor." Another explosion, closer this time, sent tremors through the crystal floor. In the ensuing commotion, Dominic guided Alara toward a concealed staff entrance that required leadership-level access. "Your authorization, Princess," he prompted. She pressed her palm to the scanner, granting them passage into a narrow utility corridor. As the door sealed behind them, the lights in the main hall extinguished completely. "How did you know?" she asked as they moved swiftly through the dimly lit passage. "Because it's what I would have done," he replied grimly. "Cut primary power, trigger secondary explosions to force evacuation protocols, then pick off high-value targets during the controlled exit." They reached a junction where 4 corridors intersected. Dominic hesitated, listening intently before selecting the eastern path. "This leads away from the secure bunkers," Alara noted with confusion. "Which is exactly why we're taking it. The bunkers will be the first place they check for you." The sound of approaching footsteps forced them into a maintenance alcove barely large enough for one person. Dominic pressed Alara against the wall, his body shielding hers as 2 armed figures rushed past. In the cramped space, she became acutely aware of his physicality, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the warmth radiating from his skin, the controlled cadence of his breathing. "They're gone," he whispered, his face inches from hers. Yet neither moved immediately. Something electric passed between them in that suspended moment, recognition of a boundary being crossed. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You could use this chaos to secure your freedom." His amber eyes held hers in the dim light. "Perhaps I find you worth protecting, Princess." The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. Before she could respond, his focus shifted abruptly to something beyond her shoulder. "Down," he commanded, spinning her around and covering her body with his as energy fire scorched the wall where they had stood. The burning sensation along her arm told Alara she hadn't entirely escaped the blast. Dominic's expression hardened as he assessed her injury, then turned toward their attacker with cold precision in his movements. What happened next occurred so quickly Alara could barely process it, Dominic disarming the assailant with brutal efficiency, using the attacker's own weapon to neutralize him. "Can you run?" he asked, returning to her side. Alara nodded, stunned by the lethal grace she just witnessed, simultaneously terrified and awed by what her pet had become in the span of seconds. Protector, warrior, savior. As they continued their escape through the labyrinthine corridors of the estate, Alara realized something fundamental had shifted between them. The collar still encircled his neck, a physical reminder of his captivity, but the power dynamic had irrevocably changed. She was no longer leading, she was following. The central security hub of the Vorant estate had transformed into an impromptu command center. Holographic displays projected real-time tactical information as Dominic directed the remaining loyal guards with the natural authority of someone born to lead. "Establish perimeter defenses at these junction points," he instructed, marking locations on the 3-dimensional estate schematic. "They'll attempt to cut through the eastern quadrant to reach the communication array." The Azurian security officers, who only days before would have considered taking orders from a human unthinkable, now executed his commands without hesitation. The evidence of his tactical brilliance was undeniable. 3 separate assault waves had been repelled under his guidance. Princess Alara watched from nearby, her arm bandaged where the energy blast had grazed her. In the chaos of the past 18 hours, the societal boundaries between them had dissolved entirely. Necessity had rewritten the rules of their relationship. "Status report on Lady Vexaria's location," she asked one of the communications officers. "The Duchess's security team has confirmed safe evacuation to the orbital platform," the officer replied. "She's demanding updates on your condition, Your Highness." "Inform her I'm secure and coordinating our defense," Alara responded. Dominic approached, studying her with concerned eyes. You should rest. That injury needs proper medical attention. So should you, she countered, gesturing to the burn mark on his shoulder where he'd intercepted a blast meant for her during their third encounter with the infiltrators. A small smile touched his lips. I've had worse. An alert flashed across the tactical display, drawing their attention. Commander, called one of the security officers, and Alara noted how naturally the title was used now. They've breached the secondary barrier in Sector 7. As expected, Dominic replied, adjusting the defensive formation on the display. Princess, I need your authorization to implement protocol sundering. Alara recognized the protocol, a last resort measure that would fragment the estate's crystal superstructure, effectively separating the central hub from compromised outer sectors. The structural damage would be extensive, she hesitated. But containable, he assured her. More importantly, it would isolate and trap their remaining forces. Their eyes met across the holographic display, mutual trust evident in the silent exchange. She placed her palm on the authorization panel, granting access to the estate's deepest security protocols. Execute protocol sundering, she commanded. The estate shuddered as precisely calculated fracture points activated throughout its crystalline framework. The security hub detached from the compromised sectors with a series of thunderous cracks. When the tremors subsided, Dominic studied the updated tactical display. We've neutralized 60% of their forces. The remaining attackers are contained in the disconnected sectors. Extraction teams are inbound from the capital, reported a communications officer. Estimated arrival, 17 minutes. A weary but victorious atmosphere settled over the command center. Security personnel exchanged relieved glances as the immediate threat level diminished. You should address them, Dominic suggested quietly to Alara. They've fought bravely under extraordinary circumstances. She nodded, stepping forward to deliver a brief but heartfelt commendation to the assembled team. As she spoke, Dominic slipped away, moving toward a side corridor that led to the exterior platforms. Alara found him there moments later, staring out at the fractured landscape of the estate, once seamless crystal structures now separated by precision breaks and controlled collapses. Planning your escape? She asked, joining him on the observation deck. Dominic turned, his expression unreadable, evaluating options. What options might those be, Commander? The attack has created an unprecedented situation, he replied carefully. The hierarchies and assumptions that defined our prior interactions have been disrupted. Like the estate itself, Alara observed, gesturing to the transformed landscape. Precisely, in times of crisis, true natures are revealed. He touched the collar still encircling his neck, a symbol that now seemed absurdly incongruous with the authority he demonstrated. Your people now know that humans are not what you believed us to be. No, she agreed softly, you certainly are not. Alara stepped closer, reaching up to place her hand against the locking mechanism of his collar. With a soft click, it disengaged, falling away from his neck. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise she'd seen from him. That's an irrevocable action under your laws, he said quietly. So is allowing a pet to command noble-born security forces, she replied with a small smile. We're well past legal precedent, Commander Reyes. He rubbed the skin where the collar had rested, freedom evident in his straightened posture and the subtle shift in his demeanor. Your mother will not approve, he noted. My mother will adapt to the new reality, as we all must. Alara hesitated, then added, the diplomatic talks that were interrupted by the attack included preliminary discussions about establishing relations with previously classified, non-sentient species. Perhaps this incident will accelerate those conversations. Perhaps, Dominic agreed, though his tone suggested skepticism. What will you do now? She asked, the question laden with unspoken implications. That depends on what options are available. His amber eyes studied her with an intensity that made her heartbeat quicken. As your security advisor, I would recommend continuing our alliance. The forces behind today's attack will regroup. Is that your only reason for staying? Alara asked, her voice softer. Dominic stepped closer, the professional distance between them dissolving. No, he admitted, not the only reason. His hand rose to cup her face, the gesture tentative, seeking permission rather than assuming right. When she didn't pull away, he traced the delicate pattern of iridescence along her cheekbone. "In my culture," he said quietly, "this would be considered highly inappropriate." "In mine as well," she whispered. "Until very recently, the very suggestion would have been unthinkable." "And now," Ilara closed the remaining distance between them. "Now I find many of my previous thoughts limited and wrong, about humans, about hierarchy, about you." When their lips met, it was a crossing of boundaries more significant than any physical barrier. Two species separated by preconceptions and prejudice finding unexpected connection. The kiss deepened, both of them aware of the complexity of what they were beginning, and of the challenges that would follow. When they finally separated, Dominic's expression held the same strategic focus she'd come to recognize, but softened by something new. "The extraction teams will be arriving soon," he reminded her. "Yes," she agreed, "and we have much to explain to them." Ilara took his hand, her slender fingers intertwining with his. Together they turned back toward the command center, where the future of two species had begun to reshape itself around the unlikely alliance of a princess and the human who had proven to be not a pet, but a commander. "And perhaps something more,"